How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Mark Zaccaria. I'm talking to my friends and neighbors in North Kingstown today as a member of the North Kingstown Republican Town Committee. NKGOP has been engaged in a strategic planning exercise to try and map our town's way to the future and make it the most vibrant seaside community in Rhode Island. One of the 5 pillars upon which those strategic goals rest is excellence in education. In the process of investigating education as a strategic initiative of our town, we've had to take a look at what the status quo is today. And friends, frankly, we find that the accounting system as it's implemented today by the North Kingstown school system is almost impenetrable. It is difficult for us to determine whether they are or are not doing the right thing. And what we smell here is waste. Waste is madness. Waste is defined as taking taxpayers' dollars and then not using them to full value or effect. It is to consume or spend thoughtlessly or carelessly, and that may be what's going on. It may not be, but you can't tell from the way the accounting system goes. Let's talk about a couple of things that have gone on with our school system. We've compared in this slide fiscal year 2004 to the fiscal year 2016 budget. 2004 was the first fiscal year where we had the current school building configuration, the one that we have today. And what we see is that as over that period of time, we have 16% fewer students in the system than we did then, and frankly that trend will continue with student population going down. And what we have is our cost per student during that time period has skyrocketed 62%. That is 62% more of local tax support. Now in this presentation we'll be talking about this local tax support for the school system. The school system actually has several sources of income, but local tax support, which comes from our property taxes, is the one that's most important. So tax support has skyrocketed over a period of time when the actual student population has decreased. Now, as we went to take a look at how school systems manage the money that we give them, that we appropriate for them, we noticed that there are several stock software programs that are used typically for managing municipal charts of accounts, for managing the double entry bookkeeping system that municipalities use. One of these is known as Munis, M-U-N-I-S, that's the trade name, and that's the one that's used in North Kingstown. So what we did was we looked at the North Kingstown School Department's use of Munis and of the use of Munis by other school departments around the country. And what you're seeing on this slide is a typical page showing the progress report of the town of Clovis, California, which also uses Munis. Now, what happens when you have a plan and you want to map it to a software tool like Munis is at the beginning of the year, you set the Munis budgets to match your plan. You've got line items in a chart of accounts, and the way all big corporate budgets work is that the various different categories of expenditures each have separate mini budgets, and they all roll up into whatever the total figure is that you might hear at the end. And then what you do is, once you've got each of those things loaded so that you can track expenditures individually to those lines, you run year-to-date budget reports, usually monthly, and you see how you're doing. If your rate of burn is way too high, you can do something about it because you catch it earlier in the year. If you're not spending on a certain budget item, then the question is, did I really need that, or did something happen? Things like snow plowing can go up or down depending on the weather, and you may budget money that gets exceeded or doesn't get used at all. But in order to have that crystal ball that managers use to look at how you're doing, you have to have year-to-date budget reports, and monthly is usually the time period. All of the budgets have to be set up by about this time in the year, and you have either encumbered costs or allocated costs. And encumbered costs are simply those that you've contracted for. If you have a teacher on the staff, that teacher has a contract for the year, so you're obligated to pay that money unless some remarkable change occurs in that relationship. Allocated money is money like the snow plowing that may or may not be used, but it's out there for use if necessary. Then the board of directors of the school department, that would be the school committee, needs to meet with budget administrators, or some subcommittee, the budget subcommittee, needs to meet with administrators regularly to go over how you're doing, so to watch how that process is going throughout the course of the year. That's the way it's done in the corporate world, that's the way it's done in many of the municipalities that we looked at as part of our investigation for our strategic initiative, and that's the way it's done in Clovis, California by the chart, hard to read, but trust me, it's there. Now, what are we doing here in North Kingstown? And the next slide shows that there is no clear map of what each of the lines in a chart of account is supposed to be. Schools keep asking for more money each year. The munis financial system doesn't make any sense. And there are negative available balances, and these are the rule. They happen in numerous line items in the budget, even months after the fiscal year. This small chart that you see in the slide here, you can certainly see all the red numbers. These are line items that have either been overspent or largely there's been money spent on a line item for which no budget was put in at all. There was no allocation. So all of a sudden you've got a zero balance line item and you're spending against it. Well, that begs the question of where did that money come from? And it may, in fact, ask where is it going, because there's a couple of accounting entries for these lines that tell us that they're not necessarily for things we can directly correlate to the school. Year-to-date budget reports are not run or reviewed. We can't find any on the website. And what we think is that as of about 2013, the school committee budget committee stopped meeting with administrators because administrators stopped coming to those meetings. So we are left either with surprise deficits or surprise surpluses, one way or the other. The definition of management is avoidance of surprises. And unfortunately, what we have here is a situation that is not reviewable by the general public. It's your tax money, folks, and they may be handling it perfectly, but we can't tell from the documentation that's there. Here's a larger look at that same chart. We have what's called the Unified Chart of Accounts. You'll hear the term UCOA tossed around. The record in Munis, in the software tool that we use for this purpose, it has so many significant line items, particularly ones that have no appropriation or revised budget. And there are some specific terms in here. Fund transfer out is what that first line with the red number in it is. There's a zero allocation for it, but fund transfer out is over $1 million. Where did that $1 million come from, and where's it going to? There's no way to tell from the documentation that's provided. That's a critical problem, especially as next Monday night we're going to be asked to go to a budget hearing and talk intelligently about whether or not we should give even more money to the school system next year. Let's take a look at where this local tax dollar per student number comes from. We've seen that it's gone up dramatically over the last 12 years. What we see is that of all the schools that are open, and the chart here on the left shows that the total enrollment is the first blue column, and the capacity is the other column. And what it amounts to is that you have an excess capacity. You've got over 1,000 seats empty in all of these schools. That's 2, 3, or even 4 schools, depending on how you spread it around. So we have a situation where we are paying all the overhead expenses for the schools. We are paying for teachers in class sizes that are well below the maximum allowable by contract. And all of that rolls up into extra money that is for direct student expenses. Now, we have these inflated budgets that produce large surpluses. The chart on the right shows the surplus in fiscal year 14 and the surplus in fiscal year 15 for a total of $3.6 million that essentially came out of, it was not spent for the budget allocations that were originally made. We take a look at other surpluses that come in, other unallocated funds. It comes up to a total of $5.1 million over the last couple of years. Well, you know, we've got a bond out there that we approved by referendum for $6.4 million. That's a comparable number. So we've got a total of like $11 million over the last 2 years that hasn't been spent. Wow, and that money is essentially at the whim of the school administration anytime. Sorry, I guess I don't see how that's smart and the best use of taxpayers' funds. Now, there's another problem. If you take a look at the actual line items that we put this money into, if we take a look at the kind of bucket or bag that we put it into, there are general fund impacts from what's called maintenance of effort, where we take the cost of running a building and the cost of the faculty and the cost of all the other curriculum-related things, and we put them into a budget for what's called direct student education, direct education of children. We now bump into a state law which requires us to make no decreases year over year on our maintenance of effort. So in other words, if you spend X per student in year 1, you must spend at least X per student in year 2. You can't go down. You may go up if that's necessary, but maintenance of effort requires, by state law, year on year, got to be the same amount. So when we take these large budget surpluses out of the money that should go to student teaching, the teaching of our children, the maintenance of effort, and we then at the end of the year hastily have a shopping trip where we buy capital improvements with them, things that would not ordinarily be directly related to teaching students, we have a situation then where our maintenance of effort requires us to spend at least that much per year going forward, even though we didn't use it in the base year. There is nothing in the chart of accounts, in the munis accounting information that's available to the public through the school committee's website that tells me any different. It may be different, but it's certainly not out there plain for all of us to see. I think we got a problem in the way our school system accounts for money, and we may very well have one in the way it manages money. Looking at the end, we have to end the madness. If there is waste, we cannot afford to do that. We cannot keep driving up the costs of living in North Kingstown. Already, our high school students are unable to afford to come right back to the town they grew up in. And so what we see is an aging of the population and a gradual forced increase of our property taxes. All of that could be controlled if we did a better job. Now, are there things we could do for the municipal side and the municipal budget? Certainly. It's 20% of the total. The big numbers are in the school budget, as you know. On Monday, on the 13th of April, please, at 6 p.m., if there's any way, be at the high school auditorium for the annual town council budget review. The town council has the opportunity to hear from the public at that meeting, and what we will do is determine, well, what they will do then is determine what the appropriation is after that for the school. Once that appropriation is made, then we have to switch over to working through the school committee to try and force our school administration to be far more transparent, if nothing else, and perhaps far more efficient in the management of the funds that you and I give to them. Folks, if there's ever a time for you to go to a town meeting, it's next Monday, 6 p.m., at the high school auditorium. I'll be there. Please join me. Let's talk then. This is something that we have to face as a town. Thanks for listening.